What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nasha, welcome back to the channel. And for today's episode of Yu-Gi-Oh's Biggest Issue, just like the last two episodes, I'm going to be talking about the next Hidden Arsenal Archetype that was in the Hidden Arsenal series, the Worms. Now, before we get started with that, I do want to point out, if you notice, again, if you guys notice me talking a little slow, that is because I'm starting to feel the effects of the shot of the vaccine that I got yesterday. You guys know I got my second shot yesterday, and I'm already starting to feel the effects already. So I do apologize, but with that being said, if you guys enjoy this Hidden Arsenal series that I'm going to be doing over the next 3 months most likely, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. It actually helps out a lot with the algorithm and everything that's going on nowadays, because it lets YouTube know you guys want to see more of my content. So if you guys enjoy, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe. But with that being said, let's get into it. So the Worm Archetype is a much more larger archetype compared to all the other archetypes in the Hidden Arsenal series. It's a large archetype of monsters where, again, as I mentioned earlier, just a second ago, it was first introduced in the first Hidden Arsenal set. Unlike the other archetypes, the Worm Archetype is divided between two entirely different strategy styles, if you will. One of them has an archetype support. The other, there were other cards that are completely unrelated to the archetype. The cards are Worm Drake and Dimension Hole. You guys know Dimension Hole, I believe, focuses on banishing cards from wherever, whether it's the hand, the field, the graveyard, it doesn't matter. But there's actually a story behind this. So if you guys remember last week, I talked about, I believe it was the which one was it last week? Mist Valley. I talked about the Mist Valley archetype last week. This week, again, it's the Worms. The story of the Worms establishes that the Ally of Justice monsters were created to combat the Worms. More specifically, the light reptiles, the light reptile worms. Through a joint effort of 4 dual terminal clans. This was apparent through several crossover cards within the Ally of Justice series. Eventually later on in that battle, the worms that were captured were converted into Ally of Justice monsters. And to give you an example of one of them, Ally of Justice Enemy Catcher, which led to the Mist Valley clan obviously falling out of favor with the other alliance members. They stopped the project and continued fighting the battle alone completely. Through this was actually a short-lived decision, but the legendary Dragoonity Warriors had returned to defend the Mist Valley, and also once they're home and joined forces with the clan, taking up resistance over there. The Worm's greatest weapon was obviously Worm Zero, which traded the threat of the endless waves of worms that were crushing the presence of Zero, whose arrival in the dual terminal world was enough to completely disturb the annals of time and space. It's interesting because the worms, as it said, the worms were more of a rival to the Ice Barrier, the Mist Valley, I believe the X-Sabers, if I remember correctly, and also the Ally of Justice as well. So the Worm, again, the Worms was basically the villain to those 4, what's the term? I can't think of the term. The four entities. I'll say the four entities. The as far as like what the design of it was, visually they resembled hideous alien creatures, which obviously you guys know, worms, aliens, we all know, of a predominant single color, which often possesses lipless, toothy vertical mouths. They also incorporated biological features from the real world worms, which included transparent skins and external mucus. I know it's kind of gross, but that's the story of the archetype. Now, as far as the playing style, there were only two. As the story suggested, there were only two playing styles. I believe one was reptile worms, and the other one was also insect worms. Insect worms feature cards like Aztecapede, the Worm Warrior, Dungeon Worm, Galaxy Worm, Needle Worm, Scrap Worm, Shield Worm, and Warm Worm. The playing style for this was having support cards like Lair Wire, Insect Neglect, Doom Dozer, and of course also as Aztecapede itself. Which means you would have to rely heavily on having insect monsters in your graveyard in order to activate the effects, which you can remove those monsters from the game entirely. But you can also, it was also a great idea because with the style, you can actually mill cards from both players' decks, which would replenish your graveyard with even more insect monsters, and you can also mill the cards from the graveyard, so you can activate cards like Different Dimension Reincarnation, which allows you to summon a monster that was banished, which is a really awesome card. It's a crazy card. I'm surprised that it's still being used to this day, which is kind of crazy. As far as the reptile worms, the playstyle of this one was mostly focused on flip monsters that would give you hand advantage. Some of the worms that they could use in that style would be cards like Worm Apocalypse, Worm Barsis, Worm Cartaros, Worm Falco, Worm Hope, Worm King, just to name a few. Worm Noble, Opera, Prince, Queen, Solid, just so many of them. This playing style, I believe the playing style of this one was mainly was not only focusing on flip monsters, but as I said, because the Worm archetype had a large pool of monsters, there were so many different decks that you could build to make the Worm archetype even broken. So to name off some of the cards that you could use to incorporate in that playstyle, Worm Call was another good one. Nebula Meteorite was another one, and of course Worm, and then of course you would also be able to special summon Worm Victory, Worm King, and Worm Queen from your deck. As far as Worm Zero goes, Worm Zero boasts the highest attack of all worms with the effect of Victory, gaining 500 attack for each reptile used for its fusion summon, and it would gain a good amount of powerful effects depending on how many how many fusion materials were used to fusion summon fusion summon it. As far as Worm Queen, Worm Queen was kind of an interesting card. Let me actually take a look at that. So Worm Queen is a light reptile, of course. It is a 8-star, 2700 attack, 1100 defense, and it says you contribute some of this card in face-up attack by tributing a reptile worm monster. Once per turn, you can tribute a reptile worm from your. You can tribute a reptile worm to special summon a reptile worm from your deck with a level less or equal to the tributed monster. So being able to go into a lower level monster will be able to help you again. Would be able to help you summon. Would be able to help you summon Worm 0, which I believe is the. Which I believe is the fusion, if I remember correctly. The deck itself revolved around abusing the effects of W Nebula Meteorite, opening with Zex, XEX. I don't know if it's that or something else. Or Kartaros, along with this card, which along with Meteorite, to yield a huge card advantage, which would also slow the game down a little bit, which was actually kind of cool. And not only that, during the end phase, I believe with if you're able to summon Worm Yagen along with Zex, I believe is how it's pronounced. Yeah, you can also activate Nebula's effect on your opponent's turn using Yagen to return one of your opponent's monsters to the hand, and being able during the end phase you're able to draw a card for each monster, for each reptile flipped face down by Nebula. So if you have 2 reptiles that were flipped face down, it's essentially a Pot of Greed, or it can be a Graceful Charity but without discarding 2 cards, which is really insane. It's kind of crazy because the worm archetype, I know that it didn't really do a whole lot as far as like the competitive meta goes, but what's cool about the worm archetype, and it's, as I said before, you're able to it had a much more larger style, a much more larger a much more larger selection of cards that you can use in order to build yourself a decent deck. Like, if I remember correctly, I want to see about something really quickly. I want to see, because I think it topped a couple of YCSs back in the day. If I remember correctly, I believe it topped a YCS, which used cards like Scrap Archfiend, Black Rose Dragon, and there was a couple others as well, which was kind of a interesting deck, which was kind of interesting. But here's one to give you guys an example. Here is, and big shout outs to Alex Reynolds, I believe Reynolds, I believe is his name. This is actually the YCS Orlando event that he took part in back in May of 2011. He was actually running Worms at that time, and it actually consisted of cards like Honest, Effect Veiler, which was kind of interesting, Spirit Reaper, Worm Lynx, Yagen, Zex, and a few others. The spells were actually cards like Reborn, Darkhold, Triple Duality, 1 Trunate, and of course 1 Book of Moon. Giant Trunate obviously back then was still, I believe it was limited to 1 back then, if I remember right. And then I think he did use an extra deck. It doesn't say whether he used an extra deck or not, but honestly, the deck itself was super consistent. Apparently, judging by what I'm reading, it seems as if back then the deck was super consistent. What did he top? Did he top it? I think he topped it, if I remember correctly. Yes, he actually got top 32 in this event back in 2011. So about 10 years ago, actually. So a long time. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, so back then worms were pretty meta, but they were more so of a tier. What was it, like a tier 2, tier 3, maybe a rogue deck of sort at best. But with Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 coming out, I have no doubt that maybe at some point down the road, maybe in the new Bursts of Destiny sets that we're getting in the OCG later this year, I've been hearing rumors that the Worm Archetype, we're gonna be getting new support for them in that set. So I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm actually curious as to whether or not the Worms could top any of the upcoming tournaments that we're gonna have in the future. Because I know that with this year's Worlds, it's been canceled, obviously because of the pandemic, of course. But I feel like as if the Worm Archetype does get new support in the future, it could end up becoming a tier 2, maybe even a tier 1 deck, which that could be very interesting. But also another thing as well, another thing that I wanted to mention is that the light reptile worm monsters were introduced as part of the early dual terminal sets. So I believe dual terminals 1, 2, and 3, I believe, and they were used by Callisto in the Yu-Gi-Oh 5D's World Championship 2009 Stardust Accelerator, which I believe that was a video game, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a video. That was actually a video game, and I believe the promo cards for that were. Actually, there were a few, actually. I'm trying to remember what cards they were. There were only, I believe there were only 3. And they were all Infernities. Infernity, Archfiend, Dwarf, and Guardian. I believe those were the 3 promos from that game. But, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments below, what are your guys' thoughts on the Worm Archetype, and do you think it'll be meta once again in 2021? Let me know in the comments below, and that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button if you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh's Biggest Issue. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys do not miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All 3 of my links, both my Twitters and my one Instagram, the links are down in the description. And if you guys have any fan mail that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.